How many surgeries have you had totally?
It's probably like, see, what I say, 13, see, 8 on my back, 3 on the hip, and 3 on the neck.
This is Ronnie Coleman's catastrophic downfall. The bodybuilding king who dominated for 8 years, crushing 800-pound deadlifts, is now a broken man. 13 surgeries, wheelchair-bound, fighting to survive. His obsession destroyed everything. But how did this happen? And what nearly killed him in 2025? Let's get into it. The rise of a legend. In the summer of 1990, a young police officer named Ronnie Coleman walked into Metroflex Gym in Arlington, Texas, carrying nothing but his uniform and a simple desire for a free gym membership. Standing at 5'11" inches and weighing a modest 220 pounds, this accounting graduate from Grambling State University had no idea that he was about to embark on a journey that would forever change the landscape of professional bodybuilding.
I never got into the sport to win the Olympia. I got into it just for a free membership to the gym.
The story of Ronnie Coleman begins not with dreams of glory, but with financial necessity. After struggling for 2 years to find work as an accountant despite graduating cum laude with a degree in accounting, Coleman had taken a job at Domino's Pizza, where he was literally eating leftover pizza to survive. The transition to the Arlington Police Department in 1989 provided stability, but gym memberships were still a luxury he couldn't afford. Enter Brian Dobson, the owner of Metroflex Gym, who would unknowingly set in motion one of the most extraordinary and ultimately tragic stories in sports history. Dobson offered Coleman a simple deal: compete in the 1990 Mr. Texas Natural Bodybuilding Competition and receive a lifetime free membership. With just 3 months of structured training and no prior competitive experience, Coleman shocked everyone by winning both the heavyweight division and the overall title, defeating Dobson himself in the process. But what made this victory even more remarkable was that Coleman achieved it while working full-time as a police officer. Picture this: a man who would spend his days chasing criminals and writing reports, then transform himself into a competitive bodybuilder by night. This dual existence would define Coleman's early career and contribute to the work ethic that would eventually propel him to legendary status.
Look at that.
Yeah, that's me in the 9th grade on the left, and that's me winning.
The early 1990s were a period of learning and growing for Coleman. His professional debut came in 1991 after dominating the IFBB World Amateur Championships, but the road to the top was far from smooth. His first Mr. Olympia appearance in 1992 resulted in a disappointing 16th place finish. The following year, he didn't even qualify. These setbacks would have crushed a lesser man, but Coleman possessed something special: an unwavering determination coupled with an almost supernatural ability to lift impossibly heavy weights. What distinguished Coleman from his peers wasn't just his size or his dedication, it was his approach to training. While most bodybuilders focused on isolation exercises and moderate weights, Coleman brought a powerlifting mentality to bodybuilding. He was deadlifting and squatting 700 pounds without steroids, feats that were unheard of in the bodybuilding world of the early 1990s.
Even when I was in high school, I was benching about 350. Almost 4, and I was squatting 5, over 5 in high school.
So that's just always something that's been a part of you.
Yes, always something that's been part of me.
But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Coleman's early journey was his humility and his genuine surprise at his own success. This wasn't a man driven by ego or a burning desire for fame. He never looked at himself in mirrors during training, relying instead on others to tell him how he looked. His motivation was pure: the love of lifting heavy weights and the satisfaction of pushing his body to its absolute limits. As the 1990s progressed, Coleman's physique began to transform in ways that defied conventional understanding. By 1995, he had claimed his first professional victory at the Canada Pro Cup, signaling his arrival among the sport's elite. But it was his training methodology that truly set him apart. While his competitors were performing sets of 12, 15 repetitions with moderate weights, Coleman was squatting and deadlifting with weights that powerlifters would respect. The gym became Coleman's sanctuary, a place where the stresses of police work melted away under the iron. Training 6 days a week in a modified push-pull leg split, his sessions would last 2-3 hours and include 20-30 sets per muscle group. This wasn't just dedication, this was obsession in its purest form. But even as Coleman's star was rising in the bodybuilding world, he maintained his commitment to law enforcement. The contrast was striking. By day, he was Officer Coleman, serving and protecting the citizens of Arlington. By night, he was transforming into something that seemed almost superhuman. His police uniforms had to be specially tailored from his first day on the job, as even his early physique was too large for standard issue gear.
Even the police department, from day one, my uniforms were tailored, the first day on the job, because even when I started working for the police department, I had probably 22-inch arms already.
The turning point in Coleman's career came in the mid-1990s when he made a decision that would forever alter the trajectory of his life. At age 30, influenced by fellow competitor Flex Wheeler, Coleman began using anabolic steroids. This wasn't a decision he took lightly. He spent considerable time researching and ensuring he had medical supervision, but it was a decision that would contribute to both his greatest triumphs and his ultimate downfall. The transformation that followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Coleman's physique began to take on dimensions that had never been seen before in competitive bodybuilding. His back development became legendary, his conditioning remained pristine, and his strength continued to climb to levels that seemed to defy the laws of physics. By 1997, he was placing fourth at the Mr. Olympia, serving notice that the old guard's days were numbered. The stage was set for 1998, the year that would change everything. At Madison Square Garden in New York City, Coleman unveiled a physique that represented a quantum leap in human muscular development. Weighing 250 pounds on stage, with unprecedented mass and conditioning, he edged out the heavily favored Flex Wheeler to claim his first Sandow trophy. But this was just the beginning. What followed was a reign of dominance that would last 8 consecutive years, tying the record set by Lee Haney and establishing Coleman as arguably the greatest bodybuilder who ever lived. Each year, he returned bigger, more conditioned, and seemingly more invincible. Yet even in these moments of triumph, the seeds of tragedy were already being sown. In 1996, during a heavy squat session, Coleman had herniated a disc in his back. He heard the pop, felt the pain, but finished his workout anyway. This decision, to continue training through injury, to delay medical intervention in favor of chasing titles, would haunt him for the rest of his life. As we stand at the peak of Coleman's career, looking back at this incredible journey from small-town Louisiana to the pinnacle of bodybuilding, we can't help but wonder, was the price he would eventually pay worth the glory he achieved? The man who entered Metroflex Gym for a free membership had become the king of bodybuilding, but the crown he wore would prove to be heavier than anyone could have imagined. The price of greatness. The year 2003 marked the absolute zenith of Ronnie Coleman's dominance in professional bodybuilding. Standing on the Mr. Olympia stage at a competition weight of nearly 300 pounds with conditioning that defied belief, Coleman wasn't just winning competitions, he was redefining what the human body could achieve. But hidden beneath the glory and the accolades, a storm was brewing that would eventually consume everything he had built. To understand the magnitude of Coleman's achievements during this period, one must comprehend the sheer impossibility of what he was doing. His training sessions had become legendary spectacles that drew crowds to Metroflex Gym. Visitors would watch in awe as this man, who by day wrote traffic tickets and responded to domestic disturbances, would squat 800 pounds for multiple repetitions, deadlift similar weights, and perform leg presses with 2,300 pounds loaded onto the machine. These weren't just numbers on paper. They were real weights that bent bars and required custom-built equipment. Coleman actually had to purchase a specialized leg press machine because regular equipment couldn't handle the load he was demanding. When he first attempted to load 2,300 pounds on a standard leg press, the bar bent under the weight. The gym had to reinforce the equipment just to accommodate his training. But perhaps most remarkable of all was Coleman's mental approach to these superhuman feats. He visualized each lift weeks before attempting it, seeing himself completing the movement successfully in his mind before his body ever touched the weight. This wasn't just physical training, it was a form of psychological conditioning that allowed him to push beyond normal human limitations. The numbers themselves tell only part of the story. Coleman's training philosophy centered on the belief that massive weights were necessary for massive growth. While his competitors were content with moderate loads and higher repetitions, Coleman was moving weights that would have impressed powerlifters at the highest levels of competition. His bench press sessions routinely involved 500 pounds for multiple repetitions. His barbell rows were performed with 495 pounds. His squats and deadlifts regularly exceeded 800 pounds. The physical demands of this training regimen were matched only by the nutritional requirements necessary to fuel such massive growth. Coleman's daily diet consisted of 6 meals, each containing approximately 1 pound of lean protein. His mother cooked all of his meals throughout his competitive career, a logistical undertaking that required military-level precision and planning. The sheer volume of food was staggering, over 6,000 calories per day, with protein intake exceeding 600 grams. But it wasn't just the quantity of food that was remarkable. It was the dedication required to maintain such a regimen year after year. Coleman would wake up in the middle of the night to consume his prescribed meals, never missing a feeding regardless of his schedule or how he felt. This wasn't just dedication. It was a level of commitment that bordered on the obsessive. The physical transformation that resulted from this combination of extreme training and nutrition was unprecedented in the history of bodybuilding. At his peak, Coleman weighed 330 pounds in the off-season and could diet down to 296 pounds on stage while maintaining conditioning that approached 0.33% body fat. To put this in perspective, most people begin to experience serious health complications when their body fat drops below 3 to 4%. Coleman was maintaining conditioning that was literally inhuman. Yet even as Coleman was achieving these seemingly impossible feats, warning signs were beginning to emerge. The 1996 disc herniation that he had chosen to ignore was slowly getting worse. The massive weights he was lifting were placing unprecedented stress on his spine, and the anabolic steroids that enabled his rapid recovery and enhanced strength were also affecting his connective tissues in ways that wouldn't become apparent for years. During his competitive peak, Coleman's training partners and gym members began to notice subtle changes. He would occasionally wince during certain movements. His warm-up periods became longer and more elaborate, but Coleman himself was either unaware of these changes or more likely chose to ignore them in pursuit of his goals. The psychological toll of maintaining such extreme standards was perhaps even more demanding than the physical requirements. Coleman's life became completely consumed by his training and preparation. He couldn't go to restaurants, couldn't attend social gatherings, couldn't deviate from his rigid schedule in any meaningful way. Every aspect of his existence was subordinated to the demands of competitive bodybuilding. The isolation was profound. While his family provided unwavering support, Coleman's social world had shrunk to the confines of his home, the police station, and Metroflex gym. The man who had once enjoyed the camaraderie of his fellow officers found himself increasingly alone with his obsession. But perhaps most telling was Coleman's own assessment of his condition during this period. Despite achieving conditioning that seemed to defy biological possibility, he never felt satisfied with his physique. He was constantly seeking improvement, constantly pushing for greater extremes. This perfectionist mindset, while driving him to unprecedented success, also blinded him to the mounting damage his body was sustaining. The medical interventions that would become necessary were still years away, but the groundwork for catastrophe was being laid with each training session. Every 800-pound squat, every 300-pound leg press, every brutal training session was adding to the accumulated damage. The same dedication and refusal to compromise that made Coleman great was also ensuring his eventual downfall. As we observe Coleman at the absolute peak of his powers, dominating competition after competition with a physique that seemed to come from another planet, we can't help but wonder, could he have achieved similar success with a more moderate approach? The question haunts the sport to this day, as Coleman's legacy serves as both inspiration and cautionary tale for aspiring bodybuilders worldwide. The king was at his throne, but the crown was already beginning to crack. The fall of a king. The end began not with a single catastrophic moment, but with a series of small compromises and delayed decisions that would cascade into a medical nightmare spanning decades. By 2007, after defending his Mr. Olympia title 8 consecutive times, Ronnie Coleman finally retired from competitive bodybuilding. But retirement, rather than bringing relief, would only reveal the true extent of the damage he had inflicted upon his body in pursuit of greatness. The 1996 disc herniation that Coleman had ignored for over a decade had finally reached a breaking point. By 2007, the pain had become so severe that he could barely walk 25 feet without experiencing excruciating discomfort. The man who had once squatted 800 pounds with ease now struggled to perform the most basic activities of daily living. His first surgery came in December 2007, a laminectomy on his L4-L5 discs. This was meant to be a simple procedure to relieve nerve pressure, but it marked the beginning of a medical odyssey that would consume the next decade and a half of Coleman's life. The initial surgery provided temporary relief, but complications arose almost immediately. What followed was a cascade of surgical interventions that reads like a medical horror story. By 2020, Coleman had undergone 13 major surgeries, 9 on his back, 2 on his neck, and 2 hip replacements. Each procedure was meant to fix the problems created by the previous one, but instead, they often introduced new complications. The financial toll was as devastating as the physical one. Each surgery cost between $300,000 and $500,000, with the final 3 procedures alone approaching $2 million in costs. Coleman's net worth, which had peaked at around $10 million during his competitive years, was reduced to approximately $2 million as medical bills consumed his savings. The surgeries themselves became increasingly complex and dangerous. In one particularly harrowing procedure, Coleman was on the operating table for 13 hours. Surgeons had to cut him from multiple angles, front, side, and back, to address the extensive damage to his spine. The hardware required to stabilize his back reads like an inventory from a construction site: 14 screws, 2 cages, and rods extending the entire length of his spine. But perhaps most devastating of all was the gradual loss of function that accompanied each surgical intervention. By 2014, Coleman required a wheelchair for mobility. The man who had once moved mountains of iron now struggled to move himself. The irony was profound and heartbreaking. The very strength that had made him legendary had been sacrificed in a futile attempt to repair the damage it had caused. The psychological impact of this decline cannot be overstated. Coleman had built his entire identity around physical prowess and invincibility. To watch his body systematically fail despite the best medical intervention money could buy was a form of torture that went beyond physical pain. Yet throughout it all, he maintained an almost supernatural optimism and refused to express regret about the choices that had led to his condition. The medical complications were exacerbated by hardware failures that seemed to plague Coleman's surgeries. Screws would break, requiring emergency procedures to repair them. Scar tissue would form around the surgical sites, creating new pressure points and pain. The man who had once healed from the most brutal training sessions with superhuman speed now found his body unable to recover from even routine medical procedures. In 2019, during what was supposed to be a routine follow-up, X-rays revealed that 4 screws in Coleman's spine had broken. This discovery came just 2 weeks after another surgery, highlighting the ongoing instability of his condition. The broken hardware was causing nerve compression and needed immediate attention, but each intervention carried the risk of further complications. Perhaps most tragically, the very qualities that had made Coleman great, his refusal to quit, his ability to push through pain, his unwavering determination, had become liabilities in his medical treatment. He continued to train throughout his surgical odyssey, often against medical advice, believing that movement and exercise would help his recovery. This mindset, while admirable, may have contributed to some of the hardware failures and complications he experienced. The summer of 2025 brought Coleman's closest brush with death. In June, during a routine medical checkup, doctors discovered sepsis, a life-threatening bloodstream infection. The infection was likely related to the extensive surgical hardware in his body, and without immediate intervention, it could have been fatal. Coleman was hospitalized on June 30th and underwent emergency surgery on July 7th. The procedure was successful, but the incident highlighted the ongoing vulnerabilities created by his extensive surgical history. His 13-year-old daughter was credited with potentially saving his life by recognizing the early symptoms and insisting that he seek medical attention. By August 2025, Coleman had returned to light training, posting videos of himself performing basic exercises with minimal weight. The contrast between these sessions and his legendary workouts of the past was stark, but they represented something perhaps more important than any personal record. They represented survival and resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. Throughout this entire ordeal, Coleman's perspective has remained remarkably consistent. When asked about his biggest regret, he consistently responds that he wishes he had pushed even harder during his competitive years. Specifically, he regrets not performing more repetitions with the 800-pound squat that has become legendary in bodybuilding lore. This response reveals something profound about Coleman's character. Despite 13 surgeries, millions in medical bills, and the loss of basic mobility, he remains focused not on what he lost, but on what he might have achieved. His only regret is not training harder, not pushing further into the territory that ultimately destroyed his body. As we look at Ronnie Coleman today, confined to a wheelchair, dependent on crutches for short distances, managing chronic pain that requires constant medication, we see both the ultimate price of athletic greatness and the indomitable spirit that refuses to acknowledge defeat. The king may have fallen from his throne, but his legacy endures, not just as the greatest bodybuilder who ever lived, but as a testament to the human capacity for both achievement and suffering in the relentless pursuit of perfection. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.